I've been really into the game Vermintide 2 lately. For those who are unfamiliar, Vermintide 2 is a 4-player cooperative action game that takes place in the old world of Warhammer Fantasy. Your job is to accomplish various tasks in the world while simultaneously slaughtering endless waves of Skaven and Chaos worshippers. The game dynamically decides what enemies to throw at you and when, based on how well you're doing in the level. If you're familiar with the game Left 4 Dead, it's a very similar concept to the AI director. There are 5 playable characters to pick from, starting with the consummate soldier Kruber, the devout and humorless witch hunter Saltspire, the aloof yet deadly elf Corellian, and the witty magic addict Sienna. Rounding out the list is my personal favorite, the gregarious and prideful dwarf Bardin. Each character has 3 different classes to pick from, and additional weapon choices within those classes, so you can really customize your character to play the way you want. I play Bardin using his Grudge Raker shotgun, focusing on range damage, horde clearing, and mobility, in a build affectionately known by the community as DOOM DWARF. I've been having so much fun playing as Bardin, I really wanted to paint a miniature of him. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anything that really resembled Bardin, so if I wanted to paint him, I'm gonna have to rip the model from the files of the game. Thus began a long and arduous process. Using various programs, I ripped the character model from the game, imported it into Blender, tried several times to rig the character for movement, gave up and imported the model into Mesh Mixer, digitally kitbashed the pose, imported into Lychee Slicer, manually added supports, imported into Chitu Box for slicing, failed several print attempts, resupported and reprinted multiple times, and finally ended up with one print out of dozens that was the best of the bunch. I sculpted some green stuff fur on his cowl and on his boots. Then I airbrushed a quick Zenithal Prime. Bardin is a ranger. His clothes are muted earthy tones that help him camouflage with his surroundings. These colors are fine in a video game, but blending in with your surroundings doesn't make for a visually interesting miniature. I wanted to accurately capture Bardin's appearance the best I could. To accomplish this in miniature form, I should increase the contrast in different ways than hue, perhaps pushing the value of shadows and highlights, similar to my approach in my Dark Souls skeleton video, but I forgot to do that. Bardin has a speckled green and brown leather jerkin. I stippled a dark brown around the armor, followed by brighter greens in a sort of random pattern. Afterwards, I thinly glazed the original midtone all over the armor to blend the stippling together. I repeated this process 3 or 4 times to build up the variety in the pattern and make the design more cohesive. There's a chain pattern accent towards the bottom of the armor. I sketched in a row of small equal signs, then connected them all with small X's. After the jerkin was done, I tackled the numerous leather bits. I hatched in a bunch of small sharp lines on the top sides of the leather straps, then stippled smaller dots on the bottom of the straps. When doing this type of weathering, it's good to pick one edge as more weathered than the other. I repeated this weathering pattern with brighter highlights to build up the weathering and define the shapes of the straps. Afterwards, I took Nuln Oil and ran it down the middle of the straps to emphasize the weathering and blend it in a bit. For whatever reason, the gloves were really tricky. I tried several times to weather and add definition, but it never really came together in a way I was happy with. I was getting frustrated and my lizard brain activated and told me to just keep adding washes and re-highlighting. After I got a result that my lizard brain was happy with, I then added some hand stitch pattern around the gloves. At this point, I decided to move on and started working on his cowl. I like adding texture to cloth. It's a technique I've used on several minis on the channel. It's pretty easy and gives interesting results. I build up a couple highlights following the contours of the model. I increase the highlight by creating overlaying vertical and horizontal hatches on areas I previously highlighted. I repeated this process, pushing the highlights over smaller upward-facing areas. I follow this up with several glazes of my original base color to blend in the hatches and bring the colors back down. Following the glazes, I add dimension to the shadows in the same way by hatching dark green and black into the recessed and shadowed areas. I then added more hand stitching around the cowl. For his backpack, I used the same technique that I used on the leather gloves and straps, adding texture through stippling, hatches, and washes. The attached bedroll gets a few quick stripes, patches, and stitching to finish it off. Next, I tackled the beard. I blocked in some highlights on the thick strands and washed all over it with a warm brown. I wasn't happy with the amount of contrast and color in the beard, so I kept pushing the highlights and trying to steer the beard into a more vibrant color. This was not working the way I wanted, and at this point I was in a full-blown painting crisis. I just kept thinking, "You're a terrible painter. Nothing you do is working. This looks like garbage. This video's gonna suck. You should just scrap the whole thing." I was fully spiraling over a tiny little miniature dwarf. Instead of throwing away the whole model, I just took a few days off, and when I came back, I was a lot happier with the result that I had achieved. There are times when you can just keep your nose down and really push through the ugly phase, and other times where you really just need to eat lunch and take a nap, and then come back to it. After the beard fiasco, I started working on the skin, and this actually improved my opinion of the model. Until this point, I felt that there was something missing, and the warm skin tones added a nice bit of contrast to all the green and brown. I built up the highlights and glazed a dark reddish brown back into the shadows to define the muscles. After I got the skin to a good place, I tried something I've never done before, adding tattoos. Bardin has tattoos all over his arms. Following a guide from Mr. Vincent Verturella's hobby cheating videos, I took some dark blue ink, mixed it with a slightly lighter blue paint, and began freehanding the simple runes and patterns of the tattoos. The left arm has the same tattoos and placement as the right, so I replicated the pattern on both arms. Once the designs were blocked in, I glazed a few thin layers of the skin mid-tone to show that the tattoos were part of the skin and not painted on top of it. I quickly add the design on Bardin's Grudge Raker shotgun, and finished up his leather boots before moving on to the base. I wanted the base to show the main setting of Vermintide 2, the fortress city of Helmgart and the surrounding mountains and valleys. Helmgart is a ruined city of gray stone and brick, so I felt that a simple brick road covered in debris would effectively convey the tone. I cut out large and small bricks of foam using the same methods I used in my Dark Souls basing video, which I'll link to here. The foundation of the base is a slurry of sand, black craft paint, and PVA glue. Once the sludge is partially dried, I superglue each brick one by one to form the main road. I then added some props for flavor, a loose brick, a skull, some smaller debris, and a cute little plague rat. I primed everything and started adding color to the bricks. This looks pretty stark and out of place, but after a few heavy dry brushes of gray, this will even out and add some nice subtle variation to the road. I finished painting the props and the base is done. After taking some time away from the model, I'm relatively happy with it. I think that trying to replicate the model one-to-one was a mistake. In a larger scale format like a video game, these muted colors can read very well. I think as a miniature, I needed to add a wider variety of either hue or value to add more visual interest to the model. Trying to replicate this character exactly doesn't serve the format of miniatures very well. I think taking some creative liberties to suit the format of the art can be excused for a better final product, which is something that I did in my Dark Souls Skeletons video. I apparently forgot this lesson, which brings me to my next point. Progress isn't linear. If I were to graph my progress as an artist, it wouldn't be a nice straight upward line. The line would go up and down and forward and backwards. But as long as we keep picking up the brush and try to remember the lessons we've learned in the past, that line will eventually go back up. If you get frustrated in the moment and end up going into a doom spiral like I did, try just going out for a walk, eat a snack. I promise that when you come back, you'll look at the miniature in a different light, both literally and metaphorically. I want to thank you for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I've been Sky from The Cozy Painter, and until next time, stay cozy.